When I asked James why he made a family card for his in-laws, he laughed and said, "They're my family, so they should have one, right? You got a problem with that?" He added, "If you knew who helped you when you were alone, you wouldn't talk like that, would you?" His confident tone surprised me. Was James always like this? He asked. "If you're grateful, you should do more for my family. Then you'll be part of it. Until then, you're like you're on a trial." I never heard of a trial in marriage before. James explained. I was silent. "It means you're not fully part of the family yet. If you don't like it, you can leave any time. For now, our family is just the six of us." I was shocked. So I canceled our shared credit cards and moved out right away. "Hi, I'm Olivia Cook, and I'm 30 years old. I draw pictures for a living, working from home as a freelancer. Before that, I used to design stuff for a big ad company, but I started doing my own thing about 5 years ago when I got married. My folks passed away in a crash when I was little, so my grandparents raised me. But I moved back to my parents' old place in the city center for college, and have been there ever since. I met my hubby James at this Italian joint where he worked. It was a cozy spot with good food at decent prices, so me and my work buddies went there a lot. James, the charming waiter, caught everyone's eye, including mine. He was quite the looker. The manager even joked that some folks came just to see him, and I totally got why. Can't deny, I was a bit of a fan myself. He had this cool vibe that really stood out. We grew closer pretty fast, and before we knew it, folks were calling us a couple. Surprisingly, we ended up tying the knot. I don't remember much from that time. It's like I was in a bit of a fog. Next thing I knew, I was married to James, my husband. But I did love him, and I was genuinely happy about getting married. I left my job at the design company on good terms and started freelancing. James stuck with his gig at the Italian joint, working odd hours, sometimes late into the night. It got tough to juggle work, so I decided to go solo, something I'd always wanted to do. That sounds smart, Olivia. It'll be easier for you, and it's great to keep doing what you love. James backed me up. And that's how we kicked off our married life. We weren't into big flashy stuff, so we skipped the whole wedding hoopla and just signed the papers. Our families met briefly, and that was that. James went to work, and I held down the fort at home, managing chores and freelancing. Our schedules were all over the place, but we made it a point to have meals together whenever we could. It was simple, but it made us happy. I thought, yep, marriage is pretty sweet. About a year into our marriage, things took a turn for the worse. My family wants to visit. Is that cool? James asked one day. Sure, I replied. I was actually looking forward to it. I'd only had a brief encounter with James's family before, so I figured this would be a good chance to bond with them. Having lost my own parents early on, I always admired James's big family, but when they arrived, 5 of them, I was left stunned. Hey, which room's mine? His sister blurted out as soon as they stepped in. She's 35, 3 years older than both James and me, and works at a local store. Her abruptness caught me off guard. She seemed so different from the polite person I'd met before. James's 22-year-old sister was there too, but she stayed quiet, barely saying a word, just like when we first met. Following James's sister's hurried lead, I shoved them to the guest room, and James's parents to my parents' old room, the only one in Japanese style. I thought it'd suit them best. Once they settled into their rooms, James's sister declared, "Well, since we're all under the same roof now, you better start treating our family right." I was puzzled by her words, but when I turned to James for clarification, he simply chuckled in a way I'd never heard before. Turns out, they'd given up their place and moved in here without telling me, he explained. Sorry, our family home had to be vacated suddenly, and they had nowhere else to go. I wished he'd informed me earlier. I had assumed it was just for a day or two, not a long. James's family didn't hold back. From the moment they moved in, all 4 of them expected me to handle everything while they did nothing, saying whatever they pleased. They made no effort to find jobs or a place of their own. When I asked about their employment, I got yet another surprise. "Oh, I quit that awful job at the supermarket," his sister confessed. She was working, but it turned out to be just a part-time gig. I'd assumed she had a full-time job given her age, but she admitted she hadn't held a steady job since high school. James's parents also had part-time jobs they gave up before moving in, and his other sister, well, she was unemployed. She claimed to be a student, but that wasn't true. Why should I work when I'm part of a well-off family now, she reasoned. When I asked who she was referring to, I received another startling response. You received a hefty settlement and insurance payout after your parents' accident, and you don't even have a mortgage on this place. You can live comfortably without having to work, James's sister remarked, chuckling. I voiced my concerns to James when he returned home, but he erupted in a manner I'd never witnessed before. Everyone's exhausted from being suddenly uprooted. Give them some time to recuperate. Or do you want to kick out my family, Olivia? I was stunned into silence. Then, abruptly, James softened his tone. I'm sorry for yelling. It's been a tough day for me too. Can you please try to be a bit more understanding? Looking back, James was adept at manipulating situations with a blend of kindness and severity. But in that moment, I failed to see it, agreeing to endure a bit longer. The situation with James's family grew more oppressive. They treated me like a servant at home and demanded money whenever they went out. We can't even look for jobs without some cash, can we? It's only fair, but if we can't find work, we'll just keep staying here, they reasoned. Reluctantly, I handed over some money, which they claimed to have used up without any luck in the job hunt. I suspected they never even bothered to search, but pointing that out would only lead to accusations without proof. And then James's entire family would lay blame on me for hours. Sharing my concerns with James didn't solve anything. Everyone's feeling frustrated about not finding jobs. Sorry, just bear with it a little longer. I'll have a talk with them, James would say, attempting to smooth things over. But as time passed, I felt like speaking up was futile. However, the frequency of their money requests gradually decreased, perhaps because James had a word with them. So the issue seemed to resolve itself. Of course, the money I had given them was never returned. Then, after about 2 months of enduring the situation, I noticed something alarming. Why is the credit card bill so high? Could it be unauthorized charges? Quickly checking the statement, I found that all the expenses were made with family credit cards. The purchases ranged from food and drinks to books, games, and even luxury brand bags and clothing. Each purchase was assigned a number from 1 to 6, indicating that 6 family credit cards had been issued. These credit cards were under my name, with James using the family cards. It seems like you'd handle this better, and it's easier to manage payments, right? Can I entrust it to you? He had asked, and I ended up taking charge of them. However, it turned out these family cards had been issued without my knowledge. James's family stopped requesting money because they could now make credit card payments and withdraw cash. When I confronted James about why he made family cards for his in-laws without consulting me, he chuckled and replied, "Well, you complain when they say they're broke, so what else could I do? Plus, you know who supported you when you were alone, right? Can you really speak like that to the important family of your benefactor?" His bold tone left me speechless, unlike anything I'd heard before. Was James always like this? If you're thankful, you should do more for my family. Then I'll accept you as part of the family too. Until then, think of it like you're still in a trial period, he continued. I'd never heard of a trial period in marriage before. Seeing my silence, James pushed on. This means you're not officially part of the family yet. If you're not okay with it, you're free to leave anytime. Right now, it's just the 5 of us in our family. Useless freeloaders. Leave, he concluded. That's when I realized James's true character. I felt like all the color drained from my face. Stunned, I contemplated divorcing James. In fact, I began questioning why I even married him in the first place. At first, I was drawn to him simply because he was attractive, like many other women. I was infatuated with his looks without any real reason. Then, on one occasion when I went to the restroom, James approached me. "You seem different, Olivia. Kind of mysterious." "Sorry, I shouldn't say that to a customer," he said. I was taken aback but intrigued, and I found myself paying more attention to him over time. Maybe that was his strategy to make me like him. Looking back calmly, it all adds up. I remember once a colleague joked that I was a wealthy lady living alone in a condo, and it was after that James started chatting with me, perhaps because he was interested in my wealth and condo. Honestly, James wasn't exactly my type, to put it nicely. He was more modern, if I'm being blunt. He seemed a bit superficial. I preferred mature men who spoke softly and seriously. Yet, somehow, I ended up falling for James. I always found that perplexing, considering he was the typical handsome guy who could easily charm a woman, especially someone like me, who was new to the working world and not accustomed to men. I fell for his tricks and ended up marrying him. Thinking about it now left me feeling frustrated and ashamed. I wanted to lash out and break things around the house, but I knew better than to act on that impulse. Instead, I resolved to seek revenge. To accomplish that, I had to endure this situation a while longer, much like James manipulated me. My plan was to gain control over his entire family. The condo we lived in was purchased by my father with a mortgage shortly after I was born. It wasn't very costly back then, but with the rapid development of the area and the addition of a new shopping center nearby, it's now considered a luxury residence. My parents, hopeful for more children, invested in a spacious condo. That's why there's enough space, even with James's family moving in. However, despite its ample size, having James's family around proved to be a nuisance for me, especially while working from home. I endured it solely for the sake of revenge. As James's sister pointed out, there's no mortgage payment for this condo. When I was 4, both of my parents tragically died in a car accident. They were returning from my paternal grandfather's funeral when they collided with a speeding car on the freeway. I was supposed to accompany them that day, but I had caught the flu that was circulating and had a high fever. Consequently, my maternal grandparents came to the condo where we resided with my parents to care for me, leaving me as the sole survivor. The mortgage payments were covered by the group credit life insurance, so the only housing costs I incurred were the management fees and property taxes. Upon seeing the amount, James proposed contributing just a bit more than that to our household expenses. Since there's no mortgage, if I pitch in that much, we should be able to manage with Olivia's income, right? We'll each use our own earnings for personal expenses. Sounds fair, doesn't it? He suggested. I agreed, thinking perhaps he had a point. Until then, I had been solely responsible for all expenses, so I believed his contribution would alleviate some of my burden. Looking back, it was naive of me, but at the time, I was blinded by my love for James and simply went along with whatever he proposed. James likely sees himself as the head of the household and the one providing for me, which is why he can so casually refer to me as a parasite. However, the reality was starkly different. I was the one footing most of the bills, covering expenses like utilities, groceries, social outings, and entertainment. Now, with 5 additional dependents in the household, managing with just my income was becoming impossible. I was eager to rid myself of this burden as soon as possible, but I feigned ignorance and endured it. Gritting my teeth, I watched as James's family freely indulged in shopping sprees, reminding myself that I would have the last laugh. Then, 5 months after making the decision to divorce, the moment to take action finally arrived. I'm exhausted. It's time to make a choice. It's either me or your family, I told James, presenting him with an ultimatum. He was taken aback, but I pressed on without hesitation. None of your family members lift a finger to help around the house. They just dump all their chores on me. You know I work from home. I'm not idly passing the time. Yet they treat me like a freeloader and belittle me, claiming you're the one supporting me. I've had enough. I cried as I confronted James. His response was a smirk. Then you should leave. Didn't I warn you before? You're not truly part of this family yet. Giving up now means you haven't earned your place in it, he retorted. I feigned shock as I looked at him. What's surprising? If you can't tolerate my family, then it's you who must leave. And since I'm not to blame, I'll take this apartment as alimony, and I'll claim half of your savings as part of the property settlement. Ah, so that was his scheme all along. That's why his entire family had been hounding me, attempting to drive me away. I had suspected it, but hearing it articulated so plainly still came as a shock. It was someone I had once loved and married, but thanks to this revelation, I made up my mind. Fine, I declared, resolved to divorce James. But this condo belongs to me, and I'm not at fault either. What did you say? The grounds for the divorce are your family moving in without my consent and your family disrespecting me, I asserted firmly to James. He appeared taken aback by my outright rejection of his terms, not expecting such defiance. It was understandable, as I had always acquiesced to his demands since our marriage. Recalling those moments filled me with anger. I can't stand another moment with you all, so I'll leave now. But be prepared to vacate as well. This is ridiculous. This is our home. We won't leave. Ever heard of tenant rights? You can't just evict us from our own home, James shouted. Ignoring his protests, I left the house and sought refuge at my grandparents' home. I divulged everything to them and requested shelter until matters were resolved. My grandparents were appalled by what I had endured and scolded me for not seeking their counsel sooner. With tears in their eyes, they embraced me. I'm sorry, Grandma, Grandpa. I know I worried you, but I'll be all right now, I reassured them, forcing a laugh through my tears. The day after I left the apartment, James wasted no time in contacting me. What's all this about? What mail are you talking about? He inquired about the certified letter. I was impressed by how swiftly things were progressing. I had entrusted the divorce proceedings to a lawyer, and upon informing them of my departure yesterday, they had arranged for everything to be handled promptly today. I'm not paying any alimony and I'm not leaving the condo, James asserted. However, legally he was obligated to pay, and he had no right to remain in the apartment. What do you mean? The condo is jointly owned since we're married. If that's your stance, then compensate me for half its value to buy out my share, he insisted, making an absurd claim. Continuing this discussion is futile. Please communicate through my lawyer from now on, I stated firmly, ending the call. I anticipated he would likely call again the next day, but I had no desire to engage in further conversation that day. As expected, he rang me the following morning. What's all this about? He repeated the same line as the day before, displaying a lack of originality. What mail are you referring to? The card's not working. What did you do? What I did was cancel it. That card belonged to me, and you were merely an authorized user on the family card, remember? Indeed, before leaving the house, I had transferred all the accounts linked to that card to another one and terminated it. Naturally, the family cards would cease to function when I canceled mine. I was the one covering the expenses, I explained. Yes, you covered the management fees and property taxes for the first 4 months only. It's not substantial, but I can deduct that from the alimony if you prefer, I mocked him. I heard some muffled shouting from the other end of the line. That's right, James had only paid the agreed amount for just 4 months. He had concocted various excuses about work and other matters, always finding a pretext to postpone payment. Then he abruptly ceased all payments. If he forgot and assumed he was still paying, that's quite a lapse in memory, but I didn't concern myself with it anymore. He's someone I'm severing ties with. His memory holds no significance to me. That's the situation, so please reimburse your share of the living expenses I've been covering. I've meticulously documented our household expenditures, which I'll utilize as evidence to equitably divide our savings. It's marital property, he insisted. Yes, understood. Let's divide it accordingly, I acquiesced. He concluded the call with a reminder not to overlook it. A few days later, he called again with the same inquiry. I realized they were not only deficient in memory but also in vocabulary. What do you mean by the division of shared property? Why is it 0? You must be swimming in cash from your parents' insurance and alimony, he alleged. Ah, so that's what they assumed. I patiently clarified that my pre-marriage savings were not part of the shared property, and since we had accumulated no savings during our marriage, it naturally amounted to 0. Don't accuse me of deceit. If you doubt my honesty, why not seek advice? Henceforth, kindly communicate through my attorney. I won't engage in direct communication with you any longer. Farewell, I declared, then terminated the call and blocked James' number. 1 month after my departure, James and his family finally vacated the apartment, not due to a change of heart, but because they could no longer sustain their lifestyle. Predictably, James's income alone couldn't support a family of 5. Accustomed to lavish spending with my card, asking them to tighten their belts was out of the question. I had intentionally allowed them to use the card for this purpose, knowing it would lead to this outcome. His family began badgering James for shopping funds, and when he refused, they resorted to pilfering from his wallet. Even in his anger, they blamed him for my departure. To compound their troubles, the utilities, electricity, gas, and water were all disconnected. Of course, I had arranged for this since I had no intention of residing there. James attempted to have the utilities swiftly reinstated by phone, but since the house was in my name, no one else could restore them if the owner had ordered their termination. During the scorching summer and early autumn, his family struggled to endure the sweltering heat and eventually vacated the condo. Their destination, I neither knew nor cared. James endeavored to persist until the end, but he ultimately capitulated due to the absence of electricity and the inability to bathe. The divorce proceedings progressed more rapidly than anticipated, not because James had a change of heart, but because of his blunders. He betrayed our marriage by pursuing someone else. Perhaps assuming he could swiftly remove me from the picture, he boasted about owning a luxurious downtown apartment, using it as bait to attract younger women. It's astonishing he engaged in such behavior with his family present, but it wasn't out of character for him, so they turned a blind eye. Prior to departing, I had discreetly installed cameras throughout the house, capturing all the evidence. Perhaps he underestimated me, but his disrespect was undeniable. He brought his family into my home without consent, racked up expenses on a family card, and left me with a bill, ousted me, and engaged in infidelity. I demanded significant compensation and alimony for these transgressions. When James saw the amount, he visibly paled and begged desperately for reconciliation. However, I harbored no such intentions. Aware of his inability to pay, I pressured him to borrow as much as possible from his company and seized whatever assets I could. When I threatened legal action for fraudulent use of the family card, he reluctantly agreed to my terms. I can only hope he makes diligent efforts to repay his debts. The divorce is now finalized, and I am currently residing at my grandparents' place. I haven't decided what to do with the apartment yet. While that held sentimental value as an inheritance from my late parents, given the circumstances and lack of memories associated with it, I may opt to sell it. On the professional front, my career as an illustrator is flourishing. I may soon live independently again. But for now, I'm content working from my grandparents' home. I'll continue to rely on their support for a little while longer before forging ahead with renewed determination. In the future, I'll be more discerning in choosing a partner, prioritizing qualities beyond mere attractiveness. My hope is to find a life partner with whom I can share my journey.